The scent of almonds drifted through the kitchen, faint but sharp, like the memory of something sweet turned sour. Lydia stood by the counter, her smile as polished as the gleam on her marble countertops. "Mom," she said cheerfully, setting a porcelain plate in front of me. "You have to try this. I baked it myself, almond cake, just the way you like it." The cake was beautiful, perfectly golden, dusted with powdered sugar, thin slices of almond arranged in a circle like tiny petals. But as I leaned closer, something in that smell made my stomach twist. I'd baked my whole life. I knew what almonds should smell like: light, nutty, comforting. This was different. There was a bitter edge underneath, subtle but wrong, like metal hiding behind sweetness. Still, I smiled. "It looks wonderful, sweetheart." Lydia had been my pride for 30 years, my adopted daughter, my second chance at motherhood after losing my husband in a car accident and a lifetime of trying to have a child of my own. Watching her stand there in her crisp blouse and manicured confidence, I wanted so badly to see the little girl I had raised, the one who used to cling to me after nightmares. She handed me a fork. "Go ahead, Mom. While it's still warm, it's best that way." At the end of the table, her husband Nathan looked up from his phone. "Smells amazing, babe," he said, smiling softly. He'd always been kind to me, gentle in that quiet way of men who never need to prove their worth. Lydia turned to him, her tone suddenly bright. "There's a slice for you too, darling. But Mom first. This one's special." Something about her insistence chilled me. I lifted the fork and looked at the delicate crumb. Moist. Dense. Too moist. Maybe. And that scent, again bitter almonds. Faint but undeniable. Lydia watched me intently. Not lovingly. Intently. Just then, her phone buzzed. "Excuse me," she said, her smile tight. "It's the client I told you about back in a minute." She disappeared into the hallway, her voice low and practiced, the rhythm of someone used to controlling conversations. I set the fork down, my heart hammering. For a moment, I thought I was being ridiculous, but I'd lived long enough to trust the instincts that make your blood run cold for no clear reason. I glanced at Nathan's untouched plate. His slice looked almost identical to mine, but the frosting on his had a slightly different glaze, darker along the edges, as if brushed with syrup. I don't remember making a conscious decision. I just did it. While Lydia's voice drifted faintly from the next room, I switched the plates. I pushed the darker piece toward Nathan's spot and slid his untouched slice in front of me. Then I straightened up and pretended to admire the flowers on the table. When Lydia returned, she beamed. "Did you try it?" I gave a small laugh. "Not yet, waiting for you both." Nathan grinned, picking up his fork. "I'll be the brave one then." He took a generous bite. "Delicious," he mumbled with his mouth full. "Sweet, but kind of." He stopped. A strange sound left his throat. His hand twitched. "Are you okay?" I asked, rising halfway from my chair. He tried to answer, but his body jerked violently, his fork clattering to the floor. Within seconds, he was convulsing, his chair tipping backward. Lydia screamed a sound too loud, too sharp to be genuine, and rushed to his side. Foam gathered at his lips. His eyes rolled upward. "Call 911, I shouted, already fumbling for my phone. My hand shook as I relayed the address, the symptoms, everything. When the paramedics burst in, the kitchen was chaos. Nathan lay pale and trembling on the floor. Lydia clung to his arm, sobbing hysterically, her makeup streaked like ink. "He's dying! Please, help him!" I stood frozen beside the table, the untouched slice of cake gleaming under the overhead light. My throat was dry. My mind replayed every moment of the past 10 minutes, the smell, her insistence, the way she hadn't taken a single bite of her own slice. One of the paramedics knelt beside Nathan, barking instructions. Another turned to me. "Ma'am, what did he eat?" I hesitated, then answered quietly, "Almond cake." "Who prepared it?" I looked at Lydia, her hands covered in frosting, her sobs echoing too perfectly, and felt something break inside me. "My daughter," I said. The words tasted bitter as almonds. And as the paramedics lifted Nathan onto the stretcher, a single, unbearable thought took root in my mind. The cake wasn't meant for him. It was meant for me. As the ambulance siren faded into the distance, I stood alone in Lydia's kitchen, surrounded by half-eaten plates and the smell of sugar gone sour. The police had taken Nathan's untouched slice of cake, and Lydia had gone with them to the hospital. I told myself I'd follow, but my hands wouldn't stop trembling. I leaned against the counter and stared at the cake knife, clean, polished, almost ceremonial. For the first time in years, my mind drifted backward, uninvited, to the day Lydia first came into my life. It was 1993, the summer heat heavy over Tulsa. I was 37, newly widowed, and so lonely I could feel the emptiness of every room pressing against me. I'd tried everything to fill the silence, teaching extra classes, volunteering, church socials, but nothing filled that hollow space where motherhood was supposed to be. When the social worker from the adoption agency called, her voice gentle but purposeful, I thought it was fate. "She's been through a tragedy," the woman said. "Lost both parents in a house fire. She's quiet, but very bright. She just needs love." When I met Lydia for the first time, she was 6 years old, tiny, pale, her hair the color of corn silk. She clutched a stuffed horse so tight its seams had split, and she wouldn't look me in the eye. "Hello, sweetheart," I said, kneeling to her level. "My name's Margaret." The social worker smiled. "You can call her Mom if you'd like." Lydia's eyes finally lifted to mine, blue and enormous. She studied my face for a long, silent moment, and then, in a voice so small I barely heard it, she said, "Mama?" My heart broke and healed all at once. "Yes, honey," I whispered. "I'm your mama now." The first few months felt like a miracle. She was affectionate, eager to please, and so grateful for every small kindness that I felt chosen. But strange things started happening that I didn't understand or didn't want to. Our cat, Daisy, died suddenly. The vet said she must have eaten something toxic in the yard. Lydia cried inconsolably at the tiny funeral we held in the garden. But a week later, she asked if we could get a new pet, her eyes dry and bright. Then our neighbor's dog died the same way. Later, a classmate of Lydia's broke her arm after falling down the school stairs. The principal said other children saw Lydia push her, but she denied it so convincingly that I defended her. I told myself she was just misunderstood, a little girl struggling with trauma. But sometimes, I'd catch her watching people in a way that made me uneasy studying them, as if measuring their usefulness. When she was 15, she began to change. She learned to cry on command, to apologize with just enough trembling in her voice to melt anyone's heart. I started to see patterns, small lies that grew larger, missing money, accidents that always worked in her favor. At 18, she married a man twice her age, a local contractor who died in a boating accident 6 months later. The insurance paid out more money than I had earned in 30 years as a principal. Lydia grieved beautifully, too beautifully. Her second husband died 2 years later, food poisoning, they said. I remember holding her at that funeral, whispering, "Sweetheart, you don't deserve this kind of pain." And she looked up at me, her blue eyes dry and still, and said softly, "No, Mom, I don't." Now, as I drove behind the ambulance through the dark Oklahoma streets, I thought of every strange coincidence, every pet, every man, every lie. They formed a pattern I'd never wanted to see. Maybe I hadn't been saving a wounded child all these years. Maybe I'd been raising something much darker. The hospital corridors smelled of antiseptic and fear. Lydia paced the waiting room like a caged animal, her heels clicking against the linoleum floor, her face hidden behind trembling hands. When the doctor finally appeared, his expression was grave. "Mrs. Miller?" he asked. Lydia's head snapped up immediately. "Your husband is stable, but critical. We found traces of cyanide in his system." "Cyanide?" Lydia repeated, her voice breaking perfectly on cue. "How could that happen?" The doctor's gaze shifted to me. "Who prepared the food?" I swallowed hard. "My daughter baked the cake." Lydia turned toward me. eyes wide with outrage. "Mom, how can you even say that? I baked it for all of us." Her voice was trembling, but her eyes were cold. I'd seen that look before, buried under layers of sweetness and charm, but never this naked. The doctor nodded slowly. "We'll need to inform the authorities. Cyanide poisoning is never accidental." That night, Lydia insisted I come home with her. "Please, Mom," she said, her tone fragile and persuasive. "I can't be alone after all this. What if whoever did this tries again? Whoever did this?" The words echoed in my head. I should have said no, should have stayed near the hospital, but I agreed, because I needed to know the truth. By midnight, Lydia had taken a sleeping pill and drifted off, leaving me in the guest room with my thoughts. I sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the hum of the air conditioner and the distant ticking of the grandfather clock. Finally, when her breathing grew slow and even, I rose quietly. The kitchen was spotless, as if scrubbed for inspection. The almond cake had been thrown out, but the smell still lingered, clinging to the air. I opened the pantry, searching for anything out of place. Behind a row of baking powder and vanilla extract, I found a small glass jar, unlabeled, filled with fine white crystals. My chest tightened. I didn't need to smell it to know, but I did. The faint scent of almonds hit me like a slap. I sealed the jar in a plastic bag and slipped it into my purse. In the drawer beneath the sink, under neatly folded dish towels, I found a small medical syringe. I had seen those before my late husband had used them for his diabetes, but Lydia didn't have diabetes. Neither did Nathan. My heart thudded painfully as I moved toward the study, a room Lydia had always kept locked. The key, I remembered, was hidden above the doorframe. She'd used that trick since she was a child. The lock clicked open easily. The room smelled faintly of lavender and printer ink. Neat shelves lined the walls, filled with labeled boxes and leather-bound notebooks. On the desk sat a small silver laptop and a stack of papers clipped together. My hands shook as I flipped through them. Life insurance policies. 2, 3, 5 of them, each for a different man. Every one listed Lydia H. Miller as the beneficiary. My pulse raced. I opened a drawer and found an old diary, Lydia's handwriting, looping and elegant. I turned to the first page. March 15, first dose successful, minor nausea, controllable. He suspects nothing. I couldn't read anymore. I flipped through page after page of precise, emotionless entries, each documenting a death, each describing symptoms, timing, and results. Then, near the back, I found a folder labeled M.H. Inside were copies of my own will, my bank statements, and a note written in her hand. Accelerate the plan. She's starting to suspect. Lethal dose in cake. If anything goes wrong, blame David. For a moment, the world spun. My vision narrowed to the paper, trembling in my hands. All those years, all that love, and it had all been preparation. I backed out of the study, clutching the evidence to my chest, and crept to the porch. The night air was heavy and hot, the Oklahoma sky low with storm clouds. With shaking fingers, I dialed Detective Claire Watson's number from the hospital card the police had left behind. "Detective," I whispered when she answered. "I need you to come. I found something. Proof." "What kind of proof?" "The poison, the plans, everything." She paused. "Mrs. Miller, are you safe right now?" I looked toward the upstairs hallway where Lydia slept, her shadow faint beneath the door crack. "For now," I said softly, "but please, come quickly." Detective Claire Watson arrived at Lydia's house just after sunrise, disguised as a routine follow-up visit. From the kitchen window, I watched her step out of the unmarked car with another officer and a file in her hand. Lydia was still asleep upstairs, or at least I prayed she was. When I opened the door, Claire gave me a brief nod, professional, composed, her voice low. "Mrs. Miller, do you have what we discussed?" I handed her a canvas tote bag filled with what I'd found. The jar, the diary, the insurance papers. My heart hammered so loudly I could barely breathe. "Everything's in there. The jar smells of almonds. And the notebook?" "We'll handle it," she interrupted gently. You did the right thing. The younger officer stayed by the car while Claire entered. She cast a glance around the pristine living room, polished wood, family photos, sunlight slanting across Lydia's smiling face, frozen in silver frames. Does she suspect you found anything? I shook my head. Not yet, but she's unpredictable. Always has been. Claire nodded once, her tone calm but urgent. We'll analyze these quietly. Keep your routine as normal as possible. If she notices anything strange, call me immediately. I watched the detective drive away, the bag of evidence on the seat beside her, and felt both relief and terror. I was no longer alone, but I was still inside the lion's den. By 8 o'clock, Lydia came downstairs in her silk robe, hair perfectly brushed, eyes soft and damp. Mom, she said, her voice small, practiced. I didn't sleep at all. Have you heard from the hospital? Not yet, I said, forcing my tone steady. I'm sure we'll know soon. She smiled faintly. You must be exhausted. Sit down. I'll make breakfast. As she moved about the kitchen, I noticed how easily she slipped back into control, cracking eggs, buttering toast, humming some old lullaby she used to sing when she wanted forgiveness. Everything about her looked normal, effortless. That was her gift. While the skillet hissed, she turned to me. You don't believe I had anything to do with what happened, do you? Her voice wavered on cue, but her eyes didn't match the sound. I forced a small smile. Of course not, sweetheart. I know you'd never hurt anyone. Something in her posture softened. Good, because it's been a nightmare, Mom. The police think I poisoned Nathan. Can you imagine? I could. All too clearly. You know, she added, sliding a plate toward me, maybe this was about money. Nathan's been handling some big clients lately. Maybe someone wanted revenge. Maybe, I said, though my stomach churned at the thought of eating anything she made. Then she tilted her head and studied me carefully, as if testing my reactions. Or maybe someone wanted to hurt us. To hurt you. You've always had enemies, Mom. People jealous of how well you managed after Dad died. I let her words hang in the air. Her mind worked like a chessboard, moving blame like pieces Nathan's rivals, random strangers, even me. She was already rewriting the story. When the doorbell rang, Lydia jumped. Probably the detectives, I said casually. Her face paled for just a moment. Again? They said they might follow up. 2 uniformed officers stood outside. Morning, Mrs. Miller, one said. We're here for additional questions. Lydia immediately straightened her robe and smiled. Of course, officers. Come in. Anything to help. While they spoke to her, I stood quietly by the window, watching Detective Claire's car pull up across the street. She gave me a small, confirming nod through the glass. It was time. After 20 minutes of polite conversation, the older officer asked Lydia to step outside for clarification. When she did, another car rolled up behind them, a marked cruiser. The younger officer quietly reached for his cuffs. Lydia Miller, he said, his tone even. You're under arrest for the attempted murder of Nathan Miller. Her expression froze, then rearranged itself into disbelief. What? No, this has to be a mistake. Mom, tell them. Tell them I'd never... I turned away. My throat ached. My heart cracked, but I didn't move. As they led her past me, her perfume lingered faint vanilla and almonds. She looked over her shoulder one last time, her voice cold, stripped of the performance. You shouldn't have done this, Mom, she whispered. You have no idea what you've started. The door shut behind her, and silence filled the house. For a long moment, I stood by the window, staring at the empty plate on the table. My reflection in the glass looked like a stranger's older, harder, but finally awake. That night, Detective Claire called. Mrs. Miller, we've reviewed the diary. It doesn't end with Nathan. We've found references to other names, deaths, years apart. She's been killing for a long time. I pressed the phone to my ear, unable to speak. Get some rest, Claire said gently. You did the right thing. When the call ended, I sat alone in the dark kitchen. The smell of almonds still clung to the air, faint but unforgettable. And for the first time, I let myself say it out loud, what I'd been too terrified to think. My daughter tried to kill me. The words broke something inside me and set something else free. 3 weeks passed before I gathered the courage to see Lydia again. Detective Claire had warned me, gently but firmly, "She's manipulative, Mrs. Miller. If you go, be prepared she'll twist every word. She'll say anything to make you doubt yourself." But I had to go. I needed to see her one last time, not as the daughter I'd loved, but as the stranger I'd finally come to understand. The county jail sat just outside Tulsa, a low concrete building surrounded by chain-link fences and razor wire that glinted in the sun. The air smelled like rain and rust. Inside, the guard led me through a series of buzzing doors until we reached a sterile gray room divided by a metal table. Lydia was already there, sitting with her hands folded neatly in front of her, her orange jumpsuit pressed and spotless, as if she'd ironed it. When she saw me, her face brightened with the same practiced smile she'd worn all her life. "Mom," she breathed, "you came." I sat down across from her, folding my trembling hands in my lap. "Yes, I needed to hear the truth from you." Her eyes filled with tears so quickly it was almost impressive. "Mom, I didn't do anything. They're saying such awful things. You have to believe me. You've always believed me." I looked at her steadily. "That's the problem, Lydia. I believed you for 30 years. For the briefest moment, something flickered behind her eyes' irritation, maybe even contempt, but it vanished under another layer of practiced fragility. "I know you're confused," she said softly. "You've been through so much. I would never hurt Nathan, and I would never hurt you." I leaned forward. "Then why did I find my will in your study? My bank statements? A folder labeled Final Plan? Tell me, Lydia, how do you explain that?" Her expression froze, just for a heartbeat. Then she gave a little laugh, light and dismissive. "You must have misunderstood. I was helping organize your finances. You're getting older, Mom, and I wanted to make sure—" "Don't," I interrupted. My voice cracked, but I didn't lower it. "Don't lie to me again. I read your diary." For the first time since she was a child, Lydia didn't speak. The silence between us grew so heavy it felt alive. Then, slowly, her posture changed. She sat back, eyes narrowing, her voice losing its sweetness. "So you finally figured it out." My stomach twisted. "You tried to kill me." "Don't be dramatic," she said coolly. "I was just speeding up what was already inevitable. You're old, Mom. You've had a good life, and I would have taken care of everything, just like you wanted. Your house, your accounts, it would have gone to someone who actually deserved it." "Deserved it?" I whispered. Her lips curved into a faint, chilling smile. "You always said you wanted to leave something behind that mattered. I would have made sure you did." A lump rose in my throat. "How long have you been lying to me?" Lydia tilted her head. "Since the day I met you." I flinched, as if she'd struck me. "You were so easy, Mom," she continued softly. "Lonely, desperate to be loved. You gave me everything before I even asked. I didn't have to earn your trust, you handed it to me wrapped in a bow." I felt tears burning in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "Did you ever love me? Even once?" For a moment, she looked thoughtful, almost tender. Then she leaned forward, her voice cold enough to make my skin crawl. "Love? No. But you were useful. That's better." The words hollowed me out. 30 years of memories, birthdays, holidays, laughter, collapsed like a sandcastle under a wave. I stood up slowly. "You'll never hurt anyone again, Lydia." She smiled faintly, her eyes gleaming. "Don't be so sure. I've always been good at surviving. Even cages have keys if you know where to look." The guard appeared behind me, signaling that my time was up. As I turned to leave, she called after me, voice soft but sharp as glass. "You'll regret betraying me, Mom." I stopped at the door, my hand on the cold metal handle. "No," I said quietly. "For the first time in my life, I don't regret anything." And then I walked out, leaving her voice and her poison behind me. The trial began 6 months later in the Tulsa County Courthouse. The building's marble halls were cold, echoing with the shuffle of jurors and the low hum of reporters outside. Lydia's case had become a regional obsession. The Oklahoma Black Widow, the headlines called her. Every photo showed her the same way: immaculate, calm, beautiful, unreadable. I sat in the front row of the gallery, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, trying to steady the tremor in my chest. I wasn't here as her mother anymore. I was here as a witness, the woman who had unknowingly raised a killer. The prosecutor, a composed woman named Ellen Pierce, began with quiet force. "This case is not about a moment of madness," she told the jury. "It's about decades of calculated deceit." She laid out the evidence I'd given Detective Claire Watson: the diary, the jar from the pantry, the forged insurance papers, the life insurance policies, the folder labeled MH. When Lydia entered, she met my eyes briefly. She smiled, that same small, practiced curve of her lips that once made me think she was an angel. But her eyes were steel. Nathan was the first to testify. He was still thin, his hands shaking slightly as he raised them to swear the oath. His voice cracked as he described the months before the poisoning, how he'd started feeling dizzy and weak after meals. Lydia prepared, how he'd secretly stopped eating her cooking, and how he'd found himself vomiting the night before the cake incident. "She told me she was making almond cake for her mom," Nathan said quietly. "I thought it was sweet that she was trying to reconnect with Mrs. Miller. But later, I realized it wasn't love. It was a countdown." The courtroom was silent, except for the scratching of pens. When it was my turn, I walked to the stand slowly. I told the truth, all of it. The early signs I'd ignored, the animals that died, the husbands who never lived long. The way I had rationalized everything because I wanted to believe love could fix her. For 30 years, I told the jury, I protected her from the world. What I didn't realize was that the world needed protecting from her. Lydia sat perfectly still while I spoke, her gaze fixed on me. No tears, no remorse, not even anger, just analysis. When the defense tried to paint her as a traumatized orphan, her own words destroyed that image. The jury heard excerpts from her diary. First dose successful, minor nausea. He suspects nothing. Another read, "Mother's health steady. Increased dosage next week." The courtroom gasped. Lydia's lawyer rose, desperate. "Those are notes of a woman suffering from mental illness," he argued, "a product of childhood abuse and trauma." But the prosecutor's voice cut through his plea like glass. "Or the methodical work of a predator who spent decades perfecting her craft." When the jury left to deliberate, the room felt like it was holding its breath. It took them just over 3 hours to return. "Guilty," the foreman said, "on all counts." Lydia didn't flinch. She stood as the judge pronounced her sentence: life in prison without parole. She turned to me one last time, her smile faint but full of venom. "You'll miss me, Mom," she mouthed. I felt a strange calm wash over me, not joy, not vengeance, just peace. "No," I whispered back, "I'll finally live." When the gavel struck, I realized that sound wasn't just the end of her freedom, it was the end of my silence. 5 years have passed since the verdict. The world looks different now, quieter, brighter, and more honest. I live in a small cedar cottage near Stillwater, Oklahoma, overlooking a lake that mirrors the sky. The air smells of pine and rain, not sugar and fear. Every morning, I sit on the porch with a cup of tea and listen to the wind brushing through the cattails. I used to think peace was something other people earned. Now, I understand it's something you build one truthful day at a time. After the trial, I sold everything that tied me to the past. The old house where I'd raised Lydia, the furniture, even the piano she used to play. I needed to strip my life down to what was real. I retired from my career and poured the settlement money from selling the property into something new, the True Haven Foundation. a small nonprofit that helps foster and adoptive parents recognize the warning signs of emotional manipulation and sociopathic behavior in children. It started with one support group in Tulsa. Then, therapists and social workers began volunteering. Now, we hold workshops across Oklahoma. Sometimes, parents come in crying, ashamed that they've missed things. I always tell them the same thing. Love doesn't make you blind. Denial does. Nathan visits often. He's remarried now to a woman named Clara, gentle and unassuming, with a laugh that fills my kitchen. They adopted 2 children, siblings from a foster home, Leo, age 8, and Hazel, age 6. The first time I met them, Hazel clung to my hand and said shyly, "You smell like cookies." It made me laugh harder than I had in years. They call me Grandma Hope now, because Margaret sounds too formal for children who bring me dandelions and paint my porch with chalk hearts. Sometimes, when we sit by the lake and the light hits just right, I catch myself thinking of Lydia, the little girl I once believed I could save. The ache is still there, quiet but permanent, like a healed scar. I no longer hate her, but I don't forgive her either. Forgiveness, I've learned, is not something owed to those who destroy others and feel no regret. It's strange, the freedom that comes with understanding that some people cannot be healed, that loving them harder won't make them human. A few months ago, a letter arrived from the state penitentiary. My hands shook when I saw her handwriting. Inside, Lydia had written, "Mom, I've found God. I'm sorry for what happened. I think about you every day. Please visit me, we can start over." I read it twice, then I folded it neatly, walked to the fireplace, and fed it to the flames. The paper curled and blackened, the smoke rising in thin, twisting ribbons. Watching it burn, I felt no anger, only release. That night, Hazel asked me for a bedtime story. A story about a good witch who beats the bad one, she said. I smiled and tucked the blanket under her chin. How about a story about a woman who learned to protect herself from bad witches? Did she win? Hazel asked, her eyes wide. She didn't need to win, I said softly. She just learned when to walk away and when to start again. When the children finally drifted to sleep, I stepped outside. The moon hung low over the still water, silver light spilling across its surface. For a long time, I stood there, breathing in the night, thinking of everything I had lost and everything I had found. 30 years ago, I believed love could save anyone. Now I know love is strongest when it draws a line. The past no longer owns me. And though my story began with the smell of bitter almonds, it ends with the scent of rain and freedom, proof that even from the darkest poison, life can bloom again. Love can heal many wounds, but not all souls. True love isn't endless sacrifice, it's knowing when to stop protecting those who thrive on your protection. Sometimes, the bravest act of love is walking away and choosing peace for yourself.